Вячеслава Борисова.
And now we give the floor to Vyacheslav Borisov. So we are back and we are glad to open the next session in this very important event. And we will tell you about machine learning, how it can optimize profiling processing in de-anonymizing. In the process of depersonification. Okay, so are we set? Okay, let's start with depersonification and why would we need it? And what should be optimized? When we speak about depersonification, we take into account the standard example where maybe 9 out of 10 companies would face. It's a case where we need to transfer confidential information, when we need to transfer a database which contains some confidential information, but we need to do so in a non-personified way, in a depersonified way. When the database is relevant to the combat database, but it does not contain any personal information. And this is the case which arises when we speak about the depersonification case.
Нам прежде всего нужно понять, что же находится в этой базе.
In order to have this depersonification process, we need to understand what is stored in this database and what is personal information. That's a different problem and it has its own specificity. So let's consider it. Before we move to the specificity though, to cover how it appeared, let's go back a little bit 10 years ago and see how it started. 2012, and at that time, the full protection in an organization was completed by signing NDAs when databases were transferred. A few years passed, and the internal requirements for the cybersecurity, for databases, for the protection of confidential information in the database, the requirements strengthened, it got more stricter, and the people who used to write those scripts, maybe to replace or remove some of the confidential information for something identical, they realized that that's not enough, because there is no linked data, there are some other aspects that are missing, including logic and realisticity. For foreign box solutions, because the Russian solutions were not present at the time. 5 more years pass. This is where we are, and we see some competition between the box solutions and what kind of peculiarities they have and what kind of patches they cover. But there are still companies which use pre-written scripts. So what is the difference? And what are the peculiarities for the scripts which they cannot take into account? So what are the potential problems for this depersonification process and for the profiling process before we start the depersonification process? First of all, it's the peculiarities of the profiling itself. Before we start depersonification, we need to understand what we have to depersonify. We have to be sure that we depersonify the whole confidential information which is stored in the database, and we have to understand that we do it correctly, precisely, and we do not miss a... At the same time, it should maintain the internal logic, and it's very important to maintain the speed. To streamline business processes, it's all about the speed of depersonification of data. And now we will consider a typical case. The process which is possible for streamlining and for
Да, добрый день. Смотрите,
For
значит, я думаю,
streamlining,
что
yes.
нет никаких вообще абсолютно сейчас уже сомнений, что обезличивание
And obviously, it's clear that we need depersonification. The fines are already in the State Duma. So if anybody wants to pay 500 million rubles simply because the data were leaked into the network because you gave your customers or maybe gave your subcontractor your data, will still be liable and you will still have to pay the fine. On the screen, you can see a typical case with 75 terabytes of general data with 13 billion number of lines in the tables, about 8,000 number of the tables themselves, which have to be ready in 1 week. And the average amount of lines in a table is 11 millions. It's very important that this is an ongoing process. We have new tables, we have outdated tables, and this process has to be refreshed. All the tables have to be refreshed and updated. And sometimes it's very hard to achieve because you might have to go into the tables to look what kind of tables have to be depersonified. Some of them do not have to be. And people might think that it's a simple task that you just change one letters with other letters. But it's not that simple, because if you make any mistakes, they will not be able to pass the tests. We cover all the potential cases where you have to depersonify, like we have this passport, we have the credit cards numbers, we have the full names, but sometimes it's not just the name or the passport, it could be the content of some polymer, and you have to depersonify this. So depersonification does not only cover the depersonification of people, but also about some things which should not be discussed outside the group. So what are the problems, what are potential pitfalls? It's all about the format. Data formatting can be different depending on the country or maybe on the program, on the organization. And you would ask why people have different styles. And if you ask them why do they do so, usually they say cost. That's because it just happened. And they do not want to change it simply because they used to do. The next line, what is that? 10 numbers. What could this be? It could be a phone number, it could be individual taxpayer number, but actually it's a taxpayer number, but it could be a phone number. But if we take a look at the column of this database, we will see some trend. But these nuances, not many people are aware of. And when somebody tries to create a script, they will get the feedback that the data is not valid and they cannot pass the test. So sometimes it's really hard to understand what these figures mean, what these numbers mean. And obviously, you could have different lines, you could write your names and full names differently. Pitfall number 2, you could have different ways to put information into personal information, underscores, maybe it doesn't have underscores, it could have different labels. And obviously developers are very creative. They have comment areas and they, for example, put that this credit was given to this person who provided this passport with this information. And that's actually confidential information. So how do we look for it? How do we find it? It's not really clear. Pitfall number 3. agree. If we take a look at the requirements, then the tests should be from the production side, but they cannot be from the prod side, they have to be prod-like. And solution number one, let's teach the machine. It's a reinforced learning, and it will go through the database, it will give us everything which looks similar to phone numbers, to individual taxpayer number, or to name and full name. But there are problems. We need to have a lot of content. If you want to do it on your, it takes quite a lot of time. It takes 6 months, even up to 1 year. Second point, you can take this model from somebody, but the question, where do you get this model from? Okay, you can get this model from our company. But what if these types do not coincide and we have different types? For example, we used our insurance companies, telecom companies, banking companies, but what would other companies from oil and gas industry when they are speaking about the polymer content and they have to depersonify these polymers, then they will either have to teach the model specifically for that industry, or they could have a different approach. And it could be reinforced.
который у вас есть, выделяет определенные кластеры информации, и вы, собственно говоря, эти кластеры уже размечаете определенным типом. На основе кластеров у вас получаются обучающее множество, которое вы уже, в свою очередь, можете обучить модель машинного обучения с учителем. И так, благодаря этому получается достаточно быстрое решение,
которое при этом, на самом деле, сократит solution for unsupervised learning, and it will reduce the amount of time it takes to go through the databases. That's all we wanted to share, and we have enough time to answer your questions. I would like to add that Vyacheslav is an owner of a product for depersonification, and I represent a company which provides expert consultancy services on depersonification. And during the Q&A session, we are ready to answer all the questions. And if you have any more specific requests, we will be able to talk to you outside of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Добрый день. У меня на самом деле два вопроса.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I have two questions.
Маскирование на лету. То есть, когда человек, грубо говоря, делает запрос.
When, for example, somebody sends a request from the
ему прилетает ответ
client to the database, but a part of this data,
не должны в интерфейсе.
They should not see this data on the interface. Yes, it's a part of our roadmap. Currently, we do not do it, but it will be available in around 6 months. It's an access to the production side. Yes. And if you share your contact, we will get back to you once we are ready. Clearly, we will share. And question number 2. What kind of databases do you support? Answer: all the industrial databases, Oracle, MSQL, Postgres, MySQL, and so on. And we are trying to reach MySQL databases and obviously Hadoop, big data, and stuff.
Я так понимаю, больше нет вопросов. Коллеги? Да, конечно.
I believe there are no more questions, or maybe there is a question.
Как вы поступаете в том случае, когда приходят новые данные,
Question: what do you do when new data arrives when the model didn't see before? Answer: there are two approaches. First one, we could implement the second strategy. We have the supervised and unsupervised learning. And we could have some strict rules with regular expressions. That's the fastest way. Second way is to look for how this. We will need to understand what kind of data this is. We will create a small data set for learning. And method number 3 is unsupervised learning, but it takes a lot of time.
Микрофон можно, девушки?
Можете конкретнее на том примере, где у вас был слайд, где был написан комментарий, который
Can you
содержал
give some
персональные данные
details
в том числе?
about the personal
Вы
data?
сказали то, что ваша
On the slide, you had it
модель
in
будет
presentation.
классифицировать
You
все
said that
данные,
your
которые
model
есть.
will classify all the
Вот
data
примерно,
which it has.
какой
example,
примерно условно категории попадут эти данные, и как они
What
будут
kind of
выглядеть в
category
конечном виде
this
вот
data
именно на
will
том
fall
примере с
into, and
комментариями?
how would it look
На
like
примере с
in
комментарием
this
изначально
example
модель
with
распознает данный
commentaries?
домен как комплексный, то есть который содержит
Answer.
несколько типов
First,
персональных
it
данных,
will
которые принципиально отличаются
separate
друг
into
от
different
друга.
domains.
На втором этапе стратегии он разберет конкретно этот
Second,
домен,
it will
разобьет его на части
analyze
и
this
обезличит
specific
каждый
domain.
тип
It
персональных
will
данных, который был
split it
выделен
into
жирным,
different parts,
он обезличит так, как записано у него в
and it
правилах.
will
Ну, то есть
depersonify it according to the rules it has in the script. For example, individual tax fare will change into a different number. Only the first four numbers will remain because they signify the specific tax agency, but the rest will be different according to the logic which is in the script.
Да, мы выдаем призы за лучший вопрос.
Yes, and we award the best questions. Yes, the best question was to the lady who asked about the re-education of the model. Thank you.